Before this video begins, I want to let you all know that there's going to be some changes related to me and my uploads, so if you're an active follower of this channel and my projects, then stick around till the very end of the video where I let you all know what's going on. Anyway, enjoy the video. Welcome back everyone. We have another update for Acorn's Tweaks. Yep, I'm changing the name one more time. This should be permanent now, because AA Tweaks does not sound great. But I think the name Acorn's Tweaks is going to fit a lot better, so we're going to stick to that now. In this update, we've got another round of enchantment changes, as well as some changes to mobs, armor trims, and some fire-related items, so that's bound to be fun. Hope you all enjoy. Let's get into it. First of all, a few bugs have been fixed from the previous version, such as shields not taking damage in the main hand, or the Elytra and Misc combo not making the proper sound effects. Though the biggest and funniest one by far is that skeletons didn't want to attack you anymore. They just wanted to give you a hug. Yeah, they'll just follow you. The wither skeleton won't even follow you at all. And yeah, they just want to give you a hug for some reason. Fortunately or unfortunately, I fixed that in this version. Now because some more changes were made to enchantments, this will pop up again. You just have to create backup and load and not worry about it. So beginning with enchantments that were already in the game, Bane of Arthropods, Punch, Projectile Protection, and Blast Protection are now defunct and have effectively been removed from the game since they were previously replaced in the last update. Not just are they unobtainable in survival, but they also don't do anything and don't have a name, so you're unlikely to ever encounter them. But the enchantments that had previously replaced them are now their own enchantments in namespace. For example, if I go ahead and enchant this chestplate with Impact Protection, you'll see is its actual name, and it does the same thing as the previous what was Blast Protection. Another change to enchantments that are already in the base game is you can enchant your non-sword weapons with some of the sword-exclusive enchantments, such as Looting, Flame, and Knockback. Previously, these were exclusive to the bow, the sword, or a mix of the two, and now you can enchant your axe, mace, and trident, giving you a few more options to enchant your weapons and make them more powerful. Do keep in mind though, it doesn't seem like knockback works on a thrown trident specifically. I'm not sure if there's a way to fix that, but I couldn't figure it out. But it does work in the normal handheld trident. Also, since I buffed Feather Falling in the last update, it's now considered a protection enchantment and is therefore exclusive to the other ones. And since I buffed Thorns in the last update, it is now only going to reflect melee attacks, as you can see. As far as changes go for my added enchantments, Illager's Bane will now only actually damage Illagers, and it will inflict slowness like Bane of Arthropods used to. And in the same vein of changes, Smite will now inflict weakness, meaning you can use that to cure zombie villagers. I figure these are just small changes that'll make these enchantments a little more useful and a little more desirable. Impact Protection will now reduce damage from falling blocks, anvils, and stalagmites, as well as flying into walls with the Elytra. Fire Affinity will just have the Fire Aspect name now, so that translations work better. It does the exact same thing as before, but since Fire Aspect isn't used in the game anymore, I just made Fire Aspect Fire Affinity. I also made it a lot more common in its usual loot sources, which are nether fortresses, bastions, and piglin bartering. I also changed the name of Magic Guard to Magic Protection to fit with the other protections, and it also gives an attribute of plus 0.25 luck for each level. My reasoning for luck is that it's just a completely unused attribute and effect in the game, and I wanted there to be a way to obtain it, as well as just making this enchantment more desirable since currently it's not very useful, especially now that I brought its protection value down to 8% per level instead of 20. So this means that if you stack up on Magic Protection on all your armor, you can get better loot from fishing and chests. And I'm sure there's some kind of RPG element there with wearing some magical robe that gives you special properties like luck. So, I mean, yeah, there's that. The next couple of changes related to enchantments have to do with the Elytra, since there are other changes related to it as well. First of which, Wings of Icarus is a really cool name, but it does not fit with Minecraft. So the enchantment has been renamed to Flap. Additionally, it can now be used every half second rather than every second, so you can kind of sustain flight like a bird, I guess. But of course, the amount of lift that it generates is lower. The other change is that I added a new enchantment to the Elytra, which is Lift, which has 3 levels, and this allows you to gain lift when you're above a heat source, such as lava. At first, I didn't think I could do this enchantment, but it actually works really well, and I'm happy with the result. Before I show you that, though, it's needless to say that the Elytra can now be enchanted in the enchanting table. Though, as a note, when you grab it from Creative, you have to put it in your hand or in your chest slot for that to change. As you can see, this has 13 components, and it now has 15 when it's in my hand. But if you grab it from the end ship, you'll be good to go, as it'll already have those components built into it. Alright, now that we're somewhere where there's actual heat sources, let's show off the lift enchantment. So let's get a running start here, and if I fly above the lava, you'll see I'll get some lift automatically. And there are 3 levels to lift, each generating a bit more lift from heat sources than the last. And you can also cancel that lift by holding the sneak key, so if you don't want to be lifted like this, then you can just hold it down, get a little closer to lava, and get a little more lift out of it. So this can make traversing the nether pretty fun and pretty easy, as you can sort of like surf the heat, so to speak. And this works on lava, magma blocks, fire, and campfires. Also, just want to point out, if you're moving too slowly horizontally, then the lift will be canceled and you'll float closer down to the surface. So if that's lava, that's pretty dangerous because, you could fall in. And I know that sounds dangerous, but if I had not done that, you could get stuck floating in midair and have nothing to do except take off your Elytra and die. Moving on from enchantments, if the Elytra seemed a little weird to you, don't worry, you're not crazy, as I actually nerfed the floatiness of the Elytra just a little bit, since now that we have enchantments to give you more lift, there's no reason to have it nearly as strong by default. So it's going to be a little harder to sustain flight and you won't be able to go as far. It's about 25%. I felt like this was a pretty effective nerf that doesn't change too much. You can think of this as the wings themselves just not being as strong and able to lift the player or other mobs as much. Though a benefit of that is that you can dive quite a lot faster. Honestly, the Elytra has always been really overpowered, so I think this is a decent nerf to it. Along with the fireworks and with the enchantments being added as a way to compromise, I feel like this is a good change overall. Now, a huge change to equipment was actually pointed out in the last video where I nerfed mending, where people pointed out that mending really isn't the issue. It's more so that other means of repairing with XP are really unfair, and mending is sort of like a band-aid fix. And I juggled a few options here and there of what I wanted to do with that, but the easiest to implement and the most effective way was actually to negate the repair cost completely. And what I mean is that if you enchant something, then you'll actually be able to keep enchanting it, and the cost does not go up. As you can see, this is still 2, instead of going to 3, then 5, then 7, or whatever the order is, exponentially going up. Now it's just a flat fee that does not increase at all. And this works for any item, this works for any enchantment, or combining, or renaming, all of that stuff. Just as a note though, the output item has to go into some slot of your inventory in order for this change to be reset. I wish it could work in the player cursor, but it doesn't seem to be able to. So if you don't want the cost to go up, you just have to put it back in your inventory. Otherwise, if you just do this directly, as you can see, the cost starts to go up. Going back to the nether for just a second, I forgot to show that I made a change to water bottles that you can throw, which is now instead of stone, they will create magma blocks. The cool thing about this is that it'll also create a magma block 1 block below the center, so you can actually use this to sort of drill down in the lava in the nether if you have a lot of bottles. I wanted to make sure that this was distinctly different from the water bucket itself, so you can think of this as like spraying a bit of water everywhere, and that sort of cools parts of the lava so it changes to magma instead of stone or obsidian or anything like that. But yeah, you can kind of use this to mine down in the lava, so you can get that netherite easier. And while we have this splash water bottle in our hand, I wanted to show another thing I did which was very interesting, which is that I added this along with a few other projectiles to the redirectable projectiles, meaning you can almost throw these things. And this of course works with any potion, so that spider's just not quite close enough to get a splash potion on, but if I hit it, I can get it a little further. Honestly, I think this makes combat pretty interesting because if a player were to use a potion against you, you could literally use that potion back at them. And same goes for ender pearls. If an ender pearl was about to be thrown towards you, you can just prevent that entirely. I could just picture a PvP setting where someone's about to ender pearl to you, you can catch the pearl and just toss it, and it'll just completely mess them up. And this also works with bottles of enchanting as well as shulker bullets, which I know is kind of a weird choice, but it actually gives you a much wider angle in which you can hit them rather than just hitting their hitbox to destroy them. And similarly, if you want, you can deflect the bullets back at the shulker itself. And it won't cause them to levitate, but it is pretty funny. So does this make shulkers a bit more annoying? Yes, but does it also make it easier to hit the bullets back? Absolutely. But do let me know what you think about this. I understand it's a weird change, but I thought it was pretty cool. And the last projectile I made that's redirectable is the small fireball, which is normally shot by the blaze, but in this update to my data pack, you can shoot them too. Fire charges can now be thrown as a projectile and will cause fire, and obviously, of course, they'll light mobs on fire. And you can use them still to light blocks by using the projectile itself, so it still has its original purpose, but personally I think this makes them a lot more fun and gives you a lot more of a reason to use them. One more change to equipment is that, as you can see, I'm able to hop up these blocks. I'm not pressing spacebar, I don't have auto jump, I'm just able to hop up 1 block. And this is true as long as you don't have any leggings or boots, as these sort of impede flexibility and movement. So I figured it was kind of realistic that if you don't have any leggings or boots impeding your movement, then you get a little bit of a movement buff. But of course, if you don't like automatically hopping up a block, you can just put on either one of those armors and then you don't do it anymore. The next set of changes have to do with armor trims, and I get not everyone might like this, but just hear me out because I think this is a really cool idea. So normally in the game, if you use an armor trim material that matches a particular armor, then it'll use a darker color palette so that it can differentiate better. But there are two things with that. Number one is that that darker color palette is not used in any other way in the game. And number two is that a lot of armor trims are actually different enough with the parts of the color palette they use that they're different from the actual armor color itself, so you don't really need a darker color palette. As an example, for instance, if I use the rib armor trim on iron armor with iron ingots, I have removed the darker color palette from the iron ingots. This is still pretty different though. And I applied that darker color palette to gunpowder. I get that it's not the best choice, but I mean, it's a dark gray, so it makes sense, I guess. But as you can see, yeah, this is the normal iron darker color palette, as opposed to this, which is the normal iron color palette. So that's right, I've given the player a little bit more control with special new items that can be used for additional color palette armor trims. On top of that, I also changed the netherite ingot to a netherite scrap to make it a little more affordable and fair. For example though, if I wanted to apply a diamond darker color palette, I can actually do that with an echo shard, which gives echo shards a use. This is kind of the main reason why I did this whole thing, which of course is different from the regular diamond color palette, which can now be used on diamond. And with gold, it's already pretty dark, and the darker version almost looks like leather, so that's why I used leather. The only weird one I would say is netherite. It kind of blends in still, but if you use coal, it's a little bit darker. Not really easy to tell with netherite, but if I use this, for instance, you have blackout armor, and it looks really cool. I also realized there isn't a tremendous amount of difference between these two. It's very subtle. Maybe I gotta pick a different trim. Hold on. Okay, yeah, Sentry has completely different colors. This is a lot lighter, so you might have to use the darker one to see it better. But I mean, for instance here, there's a lot more of a difference. You can definitely see it. This gives the player a lot more control over their armor trims, and in some ways, it actually looks really cool. Like for instance, this is a very subtle change that just gives little studs almost, instead of a much darker color like this that you normally get with diamonds. And as you can see with this one, for instance, if I use Echo here, the whole pattern is here, but if I use Diamond, it sort of like blends into the armor, which looks really cool. And with Iron, it almost looks like there's chips on the side. Like if I change this, you can see where they clearly are, but here it almost looks like there's a bit of definition, a bit of like armor wearing down, which I think looks really good for like an RPG setting. Either way, this gives the player a lot more control and gives some more items different uses. The main one, again, is the Echo Shard. It's now finally useful in more than one way. But yeah, I thought this was a pretty cool change. Let me know what you think. I'm definitely keeping the Echo Shard one, but the other ones I can understand if the items are a little weird or anything. I just wanted to have all of the darker color palettes used versus just one at a time for one specific case. And hey, all the power to the player when there's more customizability. I feel like the regular implementation of armor trims was a bit lackluster, but I think this update helps it a lot. Now moving on to some food changes, the first thing I want to mention is that since I couldn't make melons and pumpkins actually give you XP, the stems themselves now have a chance to give you XP. And since you're giving up the chance to harvest food, as opposed to the other crops where you are harvesting food by breaking them, these ones have double the amount of chance to give you XP, so 50% instead of 25. Additionally, food that only restores one hunger, such as beetroots, can now be eaten quicker, much like kelp. All uncooked meats will have the 30% chance to give you hunger that chicken does, and meats themselves take 50% longer to eat instead of the usual time. And stews and soup, being the most hunger-restoring items naturally in the game, will take twice as long to eat than normal. They also won't have any eating particles and will have a drink sound effect instead. If you have any other ideas for hunger and food-related changes, let me know. These are just the basic ones I thought would be very easy and fun to implement, as it gives some different foods different benefits and drawbacks. And real quick, just a couple of crafting changes before I get to the last set of changes, is that rotten flesh can now be cooked in the furnace at normal speed, but instead of producing leather itself, it'll actually produce renamed rabbit hide, which is just simply called hide, meaning that although the smelt time is normal, you'll need 4 of them to create leather. And also, redstone dust can be turned into red dye. Now the last set of changes relate to mobs, the first of which is that magma cubes and slimes no longer take fall damage at all. Armadillos and turtles will have a chance to drop their scoots upon death, though with turtles, they'll have a chance to drop seagrass as well, so it's split between the two. But as you can see, armadillos will drop their scoots when they die. Silverfish and endermite only have 5 health each, and Vex and phantoms will both only have 10 health each. Speaking of endermites, vexes, and phantoms, them and the endermen will have one of their attack damage converted to magic damage, which makes the magic protection enchantment itself a little more useful. Additionally, endermen deal 1 less damage, so that's 6 total instead of 7, with one of those being magic damage. So I've got full protection for netherite armor, and if I piss this guy off here, you'll see that he will deal 1 additional damage no matter what, and that's the magic damage itself, since protection doesn't protect you from it. And in the case of Vex, their base attack damage, which is now 3, is going to completely all be magic. So they're weaker overall with the health and attack damage decrease, but they have attack damage that's harder to avoid. So, it's a bit of a trade-off. Nearing the end, horses, mules, donkeys, and all the other mobs that normally dismount in water will now not be stranded in water, as they can move a little bit. And their water movement speed isn't great, but it does allow them to at least get out of the water themselves instead of being stuck there and completely frozen. Of course, this guy's being a bad example. There we go. There. See, he's moving. He's moving. Armor stands, when placed from the item, will have arms by default now, just like they do in Bedrock. Nearing the end, I have another change related to fire, and that is that creepers who are on fire, when they explode, will actually have a bigger blast radius than normal, as you can see. And on that note, creepers that are actively on fire when they're about to die will actually self-ignite when they're really low. So if you're clever with fire aspect, you can easily take out a group of enemies just by lighting a creeper on fire. It's dangerous, but it's also pretty fun. Last but not least, the baby versions of adult mobs that will never grow up, such as baby zombies, will have only half the health and half the attack that their adult versions have. So as you can see, he's not dealing much damage, and I could just kill him very easily. So that does it for this update. Let me know what you think in the comments below and give it a try yourself. I think this data pack is coming along pretty well, so I want to hear feedback about the changes I've made and what you all think about them. So as far as the news goes that I said at the beginning, long story short, I'm enlisted with my country's military, and my time to leave is coming up soon. It'll be the beginning of 2025, next year. So what that means for uploads is that for about 2 months, I will be completely radio silent and have no access to the internet, so obviously no uploads or comments or anything then. Then for 4 months after that, I'll be in tech school, which means I most likely won't be able to work on anything. Don't know for sure, but I'll at least be online and able to respond to comments and whatnot. So 6 months or so down the line, I'll hopefully be able to start making projects again, because I do enjoy this and I do enjoy the feedback that everyone's given me and all that. So anyways, just letting you all know that hopefully after 6 months or so, I'll be able to get back to these projects. There is no guarantee, of course. Who knows what'll happen, but that's the expectation. So we'll see if that happens. Anyways, I want to thank everyone for the support that has been incredible for these Datapack update videos and stuff, and helping me shape this pack, as well as my other one, to be things that we all really like. I appreciate the help in making these, but career comes first, passion projects come later, so hopefully I'll get back to this, but there's no guarantees. Sorry to be blunt about it, but that's just the truth. Anyway, see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.